have you by any chance seen Zach Fleer's wedding photo out on the golf course that was kind of circulating online? Because I got a lot of respect for Jason after that thing. My man came on strong in those photos.
I mean, that's a pretty big time beard.
He had some swag. Like I'm like, I mean, no offense to Zach and his wedding photos, but I'm like, Jason stole the show in these pictures. It's crazy.
The Detroit Pistons select Luke Kennard from Duke University.
Bang! Samaje Christian, 3.
Welcome back, everybody. Triple Double Podcast time. My name is Corey Albertson of Triple Double Prospects, here with Jason Morrow of 270 Hoops as our producer. And our guest today is my very good friend, Aaron Fuss. Coach Fuss, what's up?
What's up, guys? Yep. Glad to be here.
Oh, man, I'm glad to be here, too, man. I just released some online rankings on my website yesterday and, got a couple death threat emails as per usual. So I'm just happy to be alive, looking over my shoulder while we record this. And, we'll talk about some good stuff today. So let me give the rundown real quick. Aaron Fuss entering his second year as an assistant coach at Chattanooga in Tennessee. Head coach there, Lamont Paris, is a guy that people who follow basketball might know. Major Ohio recruiting ties from his time at Wisconsin and Akron, and went to play college basketball in the state of Ohio. Before joining Chattanooga, Coach Fuss spent 9 years at Ohio University in both an operations role and as an assistant coach. Started in basketball as a manager and then a GA at Ohio State. And he is the great white hype, the high flyer out of Pataskala, Ohio. So,
yeah,
Coach Fuss, man, give us the rundown. Give us the rundown from your Duncan days to your coaching days. How'd you get here?
It wasn't pretty. I know that. That's especially from the dunking days. Those were not pretty either. I think one of the only people that's ever seen me get a live game dunk, because it hasn't happened very many times, would have been J.J. Sullinger. He came back with me for an alumni basketball game at my high school one day. It was probably he had just finished college, and I was probably going into my first year as a GA or something. And we came back and played teachers versus students, and I got one of the slowest dunks ever. And so he gave me a hard time about that for a while, but. Yeah, that was the extent of the dunking days, but mostly just a lot of grinding it out, man. I mean, all along the way, just nothing really flashy or special, just kind of, being in the right place at the right time and working hard and having the benefit, the biggest thing, to be around some really, really tremendous coaches and people and learn from those guys and obviously have a chance to move around, move up because of them. So, yeah.
Everybody always says, trust the process. And it's like the most overused thing now, but it's really been kind of your thing. I mean, you went on a similar path to me in college in that you were a manager, and, there's no glory in that, but it's a great educational experience, and you've kind of grinded your way, up there and everything. And in doing research for this, I knew you were a manager, but one thing I didn't know was that you were, worked with 2 head coaches at Ohio State. So, we've never really talked about kind of the manager role on the podcast. I mean, just talk about your experience at Ohio State, your responsibilities, and just what that whole process was like.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, for me, it was an avenue to be able to continue to be around basketball. Like I had some opportunities to probably sit the bench on some not very good Division III schools. And, I grew up 30 minutes from Columbus, and Ohio State was always my place that I wanted to go and be. And I was not one of the ridiculous people that would have been emailing the scouting service times at the guys at that point, telling them I should have been on the team there. Like I knew that wasn't going to happen, but I wanted to be around the team. I wanted to be around high level basketball so that I could give myself a chance to coach. And I initially just wanted to coach high school basketball. I love basketball. I wanted to be around it and wanted to teach high school and coach high school. And got a chance. My high school coach helped me get the job there at Ohio State, and it was really competitive. And it's some of it is what you think it would be, right? Like, it's just stuff that people don't really want to do. But the nice thing is, like, when you're at some of these higher level spots, like, we weren't doing laundry. There was an actual full-time employee that was doing the equipment and doing the laundry. So, like, thankfully we didn't have to do that stuff. But there was a lot of wiping floors and filling water bottles and making sure guys had the things that they needed to have. And you did those things, and then that gave you the opportunity, if you did those things well, even though they were not very fun and they weren't really that hard, but if you put effort into those, then you got the opportunity to, an assistant coach would say, hey, I'm watching film here later on, feel free to pop in, like things like that. Those opportunities those doors start to open, because people see that, okay, well, this guy, he cares about the water, cares about these guys making sure they're getting their passes snapped back to them, and whenever they're shooting in drills, like silly stuff, right? Like things that you think are silly, but people notice those things, and that gives you more opportunities. It's like anything in business, any other field, right? There's always, you got to work your way up from the bottom. And thankfully I got a chance to, like I said, do that at a place where we had high level players. That's the big reason why I wanted to do that there, is because you get to learn and see what it's like, guys at the highest level of their sport, the coaches, the players, all those things. And it was a tremendous opportunity.
It's such a shocker. I remember, so many stories of being a manager, and one of my best friends, back at UC was a manager. His name was Corey also, and he was a year older than me. And I remember talking to him as I was first getting started, and he was just telling me how much he learns about basketball. And he was just like, man, when I saw these guys that were new to campus, that came with Coach Cronin for his first year, he's like, I thought we were going to win the national championship in open gym. These guys are so much better than anybody you've ever seen play basketball live. And he's like, then the games come, and you're like, oh my God, the guys from Syracuse and Louisville and Georgetown and Villanova are infinitely better. But you got some time to spend around some great players, and that's awesome. But my experience was similar to yours in a lot of ways. And like I said, the more you do, the more you get trusted, and your good things that you get to do are, you earn an opportunity to get scholarship down the road. I was super blessed that because of some room assignments and numbers, I got housing paid for my freshman year, so it saved me a lot of money at an early age, and a scholarship after that. But got to learn a lot. The things I didn't like to do was like the office end of it, but you certainly got your fair share of that.
Even like licking envelopes and sending out
handwriting the envelopes, man. I used to get them. I used to get the handwritten envelopes rejected sometimes because I've never had good. I'm a lefty. We don't have good handwriting. So. But when you were at O State, you were with Oden and Conley, right? On the was it the national runner-up team?
Yeah, yep. So that was my second year as a graduate assistant. So we actually won the Big Ten. We won the Big Ten my freshman year with Coach O'Brien, and so that, I know nothing, and I'm in there. I think, oh, this is cool. We win a Big Ten championship. We get a ring. This is normal, And so we won it my freshman year. We ended up going back to back both years. I was a GA, and it was a cool experience, because a lot of those guys who won it the first time, it was JJ, Terrence Dye, like all those guys got a chance to win a Big Ten championship, and so that was really cool, to be there with those guys throughout that journey. A lot of those guys were in my class, and then, the Oden and Conley crew was great, and it was as advertised, right? Like, everybody talks about a lot of the stuff from the TBT and all those things, like about Greg being a normal person or not, or Mike being, like, those guys were normal. All those guys, like Daquan, David Lighty, like those guys, it was the dream group, because they were obviously talented at basketball, but at the same time, like, those guys were humble. Like they were, Greg would be sitting he'd be sitting with the managers at team meals. Like, like that was, those guys were like, they were a manager's dream. Those guys were a coach's dream because they were like, just like I said, normal guys. It was really cool that, to kind of see how they handled their business, to see how, okay, all great players, they don't have to be prima donnas, right? Like you hear all these horror stories about, well, they're good, they have to be a prima donna. No, these guys were not. And so that was an unbelievable experience to be able to go through that run with that team. And, I don't think we lost at Wisconsin, I believe was maybe the second or third Big Ten game. It was early in January. And I don't think we lost again until the national championship game. So, it was a ridiculous stretch with that team. Really, really fun run.
That's great. That's great. And again, not as good of teams when I was at Cincinnati, but similar experience in terms of working with guys. It shows, character guys. Our best player was Deontay Vaughn. I'm also, coincidentally, an Indianapolis guy that grew up with Conley and Oden a little bit, but, was the easiest guy to deal with. And that, really spreads. And, how you treat managers,
Yep.
especially undergraduate guys, for somebody like a Greg Oden or Mike Conley, who's going to be a one-and-done NBA player, it goes to show a lot about your character. And I think it's something that, looking ahead, like NBA guys certainly ask, like, how do you treat the support staff? And is it going to affect your draft stock to the point they don't draft you? No. But is it something that might be a little, personality check mark in the right direction? Absolutely. So, being a GA, that's stories where you talk to a lot of different coaches, and some people have had great experiences where the head coach or the assistant coaches really take them under their wing, and they get to learn a lot about, the coaching aspect, the day-to-day stuff that you just can't do as an undergraduate. And then I've also heard stories of guys who basically said, well, I was just another manager essentially for 2 more years, but I did get my education. So, you obviously learned a lot about coaching, and then that kind of led to you, moving towards an operational role at OU?
Yeah, definitely. No, it was I got to do a little bit of everything when I was there at Ohio State, and that was good.
And Thad is so well respected by everybody.
Oh man, he's great. That's like, you say that. I can say Thad's great. I've been really lucky because everybody I've worked for has been really good, and Thad is one of just like I guess maybe I've been around a pretty normal crew of guys, because you see so many of these guys that they're just so like they can only talk about coaching. They're just so one-dimensional, which is, I'm not, it's not a bad thing. I'm not judging anybody, but it's like, that would be, he'd be able to, you could have like a normal conversation with him. And it was just like, it was a really, really down-to-earth guy, and really cared about the people that was around him. The biggest thing he could do was, like, he could motivate you at a ridiculous level, and he had a really, really strong ability to relate to people. So, like, you couple those two strengths, and, like, it's no wonder why guys played hard for him, right? And guys loved him, like, because he could relate to them, and, like, and at the end of the day, he knew what buttons to push. So, but yeah, so had a great experience at Ohio State. Actually, like, this might be pertinent information. As you're talking about, like, people getting into the coaching industry and things like that. But so we make the national championship game, right? Like, I'm thinking, I'm the man, right? I'm a GA. We're in the national championship. Like, Coach K's probably calling me, offering me an assistant job, right? Like, clearly that's the next step. And what do you know? Like, was just busting my tail trying to get job opportunities, and ended up finishing second on a couple jobs, and turned down a couple opportunities that I probably shouldn't have. Like, it all worked out in the end, but like, the coaching deal, especially early on, it's really just a competition to see who can, like, it's risk aversion. Like, if you can handle not making any money, doing all the things no one wants to do, and you can do that at a decent pace, you're going to be able to stick around somewhere, right? But most people, they just hit the wall where they're like, this is crazy. I have to at least make a salary, right? Like,
you've got to survive the first few years, right? Where you're, in anything, in scouting and coaching and, anything basketball, anything sports, any highly competitive industry, it's not about just how hard. And I mean, you guys work hard in your day to day now as assistant coaches, but the hard part isn't that job. The hard part is getting that job, and to get that job, sure, you've got to go through so much. And I mean, the applicant pool for a director of operations, especially like taking Ohio U, which is like a prominent mid-major program, especially, it is very, very difficult, and you're going to be living above your means financially. And, you have to sacrifice, and then you're going to work, as a director of ops at a ridiculous amount of hours, especially, my experience, I wasn't an ops guy, but just working with, the ops guys on staff at Cincinnati was, the resources were there because it's a high major institution. So you got a lot of help from other parts of athletic department, but, going through what you went through at the MAC level, I'm sure you really, really had to work. And, we've never had somebody on the podcast that we've really talked about, the operations background. So, as director of ops at Ohio U, I mean, what were the main things you were really responsible for?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of everything, really. And it was right at the time where not every school had director of ops. It was kind of created as I was when Coach Gross got the job. It was kind of in the works to get that thing created. So I was kind of the first one there, and some MAC schools didn't have it. Most MAC schools didn't have video coordinators, so there's a lot of, you talk about all those different support positions and things like that. Like, so the way that, and each head coach can structure their staff differently, right? Like, that's just normal. So some guys will have different assistant coaches do a lot of different things. Some guys won't. And for me, my, John's vision of the position and strengths of mine, like, my goal was to make sure that the assistant coaches and Coach Gross were able to worry about nothing other than recruiting and coaching. That was my ultimate goal. And I think that's, in my mind, that's what good operations people should be doing, is making sure that they are taking things off of those guys' plates so that those guys can do their jobs effectively. That they need time to recruit, they need time to coach, there's a lot of moving pieces with those things, and working guys out, watching film with guys, being on the road, all that stuff. So,
but the operations role, Fuss, is so it's an entry level position, just like being a not a paralegal, but a first year out of law school type of guy. I mean, part of your job is doing exactly what you said, which is making the coaches' lives easier. But the second part of your job is the selfish part, where you also want to continue to educate yourself. I mean, you've seen, being a manager at Ohio State, you've seen how practice works. You've seen a little bit of how the game stuff works. Not all of it, but you got to continue to educate yourself now. And, when it's my time to be a coach, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? So, how do you balance that with the kind of educational process with the actual running the day-to-day operations and all the, busy work that goes with that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's not really any balance. There's not. And there's just so much to do at that time. Now there's more staff members at a lot of MAC schools. There's more GAs. There's things like that. But, at the time, there were not a lot of hands. And that's one thing, like, I was not blessed with a lot of athletic ability, but I was given the ability to be able to handle some large volumes of work. So, I wasn't married at the time, no kids, I had no hobbies. It was just straight up, I'm in the office nonstop. And it was, some crazy hours. So a lot of times, basically what I would do is I'd have chunks out of my day where I knew that, that I was going to be doing basketball stuff as much as I was allowed to be able to do, whether that was trying to watch some extra film or trying to network with some people or things like that. Like, I'd have a little bit of time set out throughout the day. And then I also made sure that I never missed practice. Like some guy, and once again, everybody does things differently, but some operations guys, they, during practice, because you're not allowed to be on the floor, they might be in the office working on travel at the time or doing some other things like that. And I just told myself, hey, I'm never missing practice. I'm never missing a basketball thing. When the coaches are watching film, I'm going to be in there watching film with them unless there's something that's pressing that I have to do. And then I'll do everything else. I'll make sure it gets done, whether or not it's late at night or get in there early in the morning, whatever the case may be. But it was, I was basically the director of ops, and I was interning as a coach without really coaching, because I knew that if I wanted to be a coach someday, like, I got to put myself in that position, right? Like, and if I just stood by the side and hoped that something would happen for me in the future, like, that's just not a good way to live in my mind.
No, you got to go to practice. And I said, one of my best friends at UC is he now works for the Pac-12, and he took a different route when he was a GA at UC, and then he took an ops job in the SoCon, and then came back to UC and was an ops guy for a long time. And, he decided that coaching wasn't for him. So he kind of took that operational role and said, well, when they're at practice, I'm going to stay in the office because I can obviously get the highest quality of work done because there's no distractions and everything. But if you're in an operational, if you're in an operational or a video role where you want to get into coaching, you've got to be at practice. And again, it goes to what we say, you have to sacrifice your nighttime because now you're catching up on those hours doing the other things. If you're at the high major level, working with the managers to make sure they're organized. If you're at the mid-major level, you don't have the GA managers with you, so maybe doing class checks to make sure guys are going to school, all that other stuff. So looking at your career, I think there's two really interesting things that stand out. And the first one is this. A lot of guys, when they're getting into coaching and they start to move up, you moved up from being an ops guy to an assistant coach. A lot of times when that transition happens, it happens at a different school. So you're the ops guy at Ohio U, and then maybe you get offered an assistant coaching job at Wright State. You stayed at the same school to move up. So the question is, when you did that, your role changes in the eyes of the players. You go from the ops guy where they know as, kind of like a buddy. He's a coach, but he's also, helps me with other stuff outside of basketball. How did you handle that transition and kind of find your voice as a coach?
Yeah, thankfully we had 5 seniors, so that way they were all gone shortly after. No.
Right, but you know what I'm saying, though. It's a big transition.
Sure. No, it was definitely a different deal. The one area that I think made it a little bit easier was the fact that, so we made it to Sweet 16, had a great run. John left, went to Illinois. Coach Christian came in. Thankfully, I was just going to go to Illinois. That was going to be the deal. I was going to be the ops guy at Illinois and probably making more money than I would have been as an assistant at Ohio. But
no doubt.
I knew that I needed that experience. I needed to get on the road. I needed to be on the court with the guys. Like, if I wanted to be a coach, this was my chance. And thankfully, Coach Christian kept me on. And the advantage I had with those things you were asking about was that the entire staff was new except for me. And so those guys, all the times that, you might be pushing and trying to coach them and all that stuff, like, they kind of leaned on me for some normalcy within the coaching change a little bit. And, I had a good relationship with the guys, and we had a crew that, we had the whole team coming back from the Sweet 16. It was kind of plug and play a little bit with those guys. And so that made it easier with the relationship piece.
Right. And then at that time, you're familiar with the MAC where the new staff wasn't. So, that's exactly. a key. That's a key component. That's a key component.
So that transition was hard, but it was definitely something that, like, I could feel that like, man, I've got to communicate with these guys differently. I've got to make sure that these guys, how do I battle these guys seeing me in this role. And I think the thing that I tried to do, like, I just kind of, I let it go with the seniors, like not in a bad way. I mean, I coached those guys, but like there were a couple times that, I think I went at a couple of the older guys just to show them, like, all right, like, okay, he's not afraid of me. Like I did that a couple times, but then at the same time, like, I didn't try to push the issue because they were in 9 months, they were going to be gone. And so,
and I mean, those
guys
guys know you as John Gross's guy. He's Gross's guy. He works for him. They look at you more like that. So yeah, that's exactly what was my thing. Is like with the young guys, it's easier, but with those old guys, I can see how there'd be a blowback. And then you already touched on the second thing. And I was going to, for people listening to this podcast that aren't in college coaching, it is extremely rare for guys to stay, especially as an assistant coach. Maybe in an ops role, it's not that rare. But as an assistant coach, to stay on when a new head coach, especially an outside hire, comes in, that is extremely rare. And that's something you did at Ohio U. And it's interesting because, you guys had some success with the new staff too, where, now Wilder, it's an interesting thing where you're coming in as an assistant coach, not really knowing the head coach. You also got to learn a whole nother point of view, to prepare you for the rest of your career.
Yeah, no, it was tremendous. Like I was so lucky because everybody else, they have to go around, they have to move all over the country to be able to coach at different places, get a, broaden their network, all those things. They were just shipping new head coaches into me. It was perfect, so had a chance to get some strong community and, had a really, really nice setup. And obviously we had a lot of success in that time with all three of the head coaches I was able to work for there. And it was a really good experience because you can go to coaching clinics all you want. You can watch film. You can do all these things, but you learn from that stuff for sure. But like, if you want to actually accelerate your growth, you got to put yourself in different actual coaching philosophies, coaching scenarios, like just with new people. And it was tremendous for me because all three of those guys were very different in, just how they coached, how they recruited, what their styles were, and all three of them very good, very successful. And so, like, it's kind of like people say to me, "Well, what do you like to do with this? What do you prefer?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. Like, I've seen it done a lot of different ways. Like,
Right.
I don't know. I don't know if I have a preference anymore." So, it was a really cool experience.
But then you also got to take in the recruiting aspect of it. So, there's one of the things I always wonder with young college coaches, interacting with them now that I've gotten a little older, a little more experience in this, is like your first year or two recruiting. Obviously, you're going to have direction from the head coach and the more veteran assistants on, these are the guys we want you to go after. This is your area. But still, as somebody who's gone through the operations role, say you don't have a whole lot of a life. So it's not like you're also like fostering these relationships with high school and AAU coaches and, scouting guys. I mean, a little bit, but very, very little comparatively. So, you go, you get promoted to head coach, you take the NCAA test to be certified as somebody who can go out and evaluate and go out and, talk to kids in a recruiting capacity. And then you've got a coaching change where now you've got guys who aren't from Ohio and you've got to kind of lead in terms of, here's the areas of Ohio we need to focus on. So, how intimidating is it, your first couple months as a recruiter, just the overload of, what the hell is all going on here?
Yeah, I think that it was a lot. It was definitely a lot. And we were it was almost easier at that point though, because like, you don't really know all the things that now you get caught up with that, you just kind of look and evaluate a kid and maybe talk to a couple of people and just roll with it. Whereas, I just feel like now I might overthink it a little bit. But no, it was a lot. And the good thing is I set myself up to be as successful as I could, right? Because I was sitting in those recruiting meetings. I was hearing the evaluations. I got to go out on the road. Dustin Ford threw his back out one summer. And so I got to go out for 3 or 4 days to an AAU tournament. And I always give him a hard time about that. Like, man, you should have stayed out longer. But so I got to get a little taste of it and got to see a little bit. So I was I think I was pretty prepared, as prepared as I could be. It's not the same, right? Because you're the one now talking to these kids, you're making these decisions, but a little bit of it, you kind of just gotta trust your instincts and just roll with it. I mean, that's, that was a piece. With Coach Christian, I was 29 years old. I was an assistant coach. He was not counting on me to go out there and sign all the players. That was not, that was not why he hired me. He hired me for other reasons. And so the recruiting piece, the fact that I was able to sign some guys, like, that was just icing on the cake. And that was, for me, that was a big thing to prove, because anybody coming from my shoes who didn't play in college, right? Like, that's the biggest knock would be, oh man, can he get players? Can he relate with people? Can he, I mean, and so that's the area where, as soon as I got on the road, I was like, man, I have got to make sure I am just doing everything I can to be the best recruiter that I can be, to be able to kind of break down some of these, whatever these stereotypes may be about me.
Right. And I mean, and that's, you remind me a lot of Ryan Pedens at Ohio State. And, I think what he did well is, he's from Ohio. He certainly, let you know that, where he's been in Ohio. So recruiting in state, he's just been able to build so many relationships. I think you certainly did that in your time in the MAC. And I mean, you come off a lot like him, where you're just very, very genuine. And that's the hardest thing, I think, for these guys that are trying to recruit. It's very easy for me when I talk to kids and families and high school coaches and college coaches about, who is genuine and who's not in the way that they talk to the kids. And it's something where I think, you're well known for this. Peden's certainly very well known for this among Ohio coaches, that, what they tell you, it's generally going to be the truth. And, it's interesting early on, you got to get out there and just shake so many hands and, watch so many games as an evaluator. Maybe you're like, well, I don't really want to watch this game, but could be great for me down the road in my career, because even though this school doesn't have a kid this year, or this AAU team doesn't have a kid for us this year, historically they do. So, it just goes to speak to more of the grind. And then the MAC is so interesting, because you got kids like Jordan Dardis, who plays at Ohio U, just got done playing at Ohio U, still there, that are highly, highly recruited MAC kids, getting a little high major interest, end up going to the MAC. You got kids like a Jaron Simmons or Kenny Kaminsky that are high major transfers back. You got a kid like Antonio Campbell, who comes from Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, that was a late bloomer, to end up being MAC Player of the Year. So you really got to stick your head in all different parts of the state and the surrounding state. But the MAC is so fun for me as a scout, dealing with all these kids, to follow the regional recruiting. I mean, it really becomes a battle, and there's guys in the state that are better known than others. And you guys certainly had some success with that at OU.
Yeah, no, we did. And it's Ohio's a great spot, like Ohio University, because it's got a little bit of everything. And I do think it's one of the best jobs, if not the best job in that league. And it's it kind of checks all the boxes in my mind. Obviously I'm biased, but I think that kind of, every single thing you could possibly, any angle you could want, to be able to recruit a kid, like it actually has. And you're not, like, that's the thing. Like, we never had to make things up. Like, oh, well, we're not going to take you over to the dorms, or let's not really talk about the academics. We'll kind of have you kind of talk about it. Like, it was so that was nice. We didn't have to hide things. But yeah, we had a tremendous run with those guys. And a lot of it is just, like you said, just developing relationships with people, just being normal. Like, there's nothing wrong with just having regular, real conversations with people, and it not being anything more than that. And I think that at the end of the day, those guys, they want to go somewhere where it doesn't matter, the MAC or any other league. Like, guys want to go somewhere where they're gonna feel wanted. They're gonna feel like they're a part of it. They're gonna want to feel like you care about them and that you're gonna develop them, right? Like, and that's a huge part of it. But the MAC is such a fun league, because I mean, 6 MAC schools in Ohio? Everybody basically recruits all the same kids. Sometimes you'll pop some kids out of the area, but for the most part, like, the kids all know each other. They grew up playing against each other. It makes the games pretty intense and good rivalries. The kids in Ohio, just the regular college students, they go to the games because they know people on the other teams or at the other schools. Like it makes for a really fun league.
So all that being said, a little over a year ago, you made the decision that after 9 years and, a lot of success, even with the current staff that's still there, you made the decision that it was time to go over with Lamont Paris as he got the job at Chattanooga. So, what was the thought process behind, it's time to spread my wings and for the first time leave Ohio?
Yeah, no, I mean, that was basically it. Like, it was, it's just like anything else, right? You're working in a profession, in an industry, and you're trying to make yourself as well-rounded as you can possibly be. And I just thought that was kind of the next thing that, man, I've been here for 9 years. This place is great. Like, I could stay here forever, but like, I feel like I need to challenge myself. I was going through coaches, and it was great because I'm learning, I'm changing, I'm growing as all those things are happening. And I just felt like, all right, man, well, let's see if we can get this thing happening again. And, I had a great, like I said, tremendous deal there, and just thought, all right, that's probably my next step is to see what else is out there. And that was I tried to attack weaknesses. And the next weakness that I saw with myself was the fact that I had not really been in a position where I had to recruit areas other than Ohio. And I wanted to put myself out of my comfort zone, and do that. And now at the same time, like, I wasn't going to do that at some awful place. Like, that wouldn't have been smart, nor would I have enjoyed that. And so, it was just something that I had been thinking about, actually talking to some people about, talked to Saul about even, and just said, hey, what do you think is my next step? And, we talked about that being maybe something that would be good for me professionally. And it just worked out great with Lamont. I knew Lamont from when he was at Akron. Didn't know him great, but I knew him a little bit. I knew a lot of people. You mentioned Ryan Peden has been a guy I've watched forever. He was when he was an ops guy at Kent State. Is when I was a manager at Ohio State. He used to come and work camps in the summer. So I've known Ryan forever. And
high energy.
He and Lamont are very close. Oh yeah, for sure. But those guys are close. Lamont was at Wisconsin, where Saul was at Wisconsin. There were a lot of connections there that there would be some familiarities, but at the same time, some things that would be different. And he had already hired Walter Offit, who I coached at Ohio, who had get a chance to work with him. And I knew the other assistant, Tanner Bronson, that he hired. I had known him a little bit. And so I just thought, man, this is really exactly what I'm looking for. It's a chance to work with people that I trust, which is important to me. Right? I didn't want to just go out there and just work for some random person that was going to be cheating or doing some ridiculous things. And so that was important. And then being in a good situation. Like I said, I was looking for some change, but at the same time, I wasn't looking for change that was going to damage my career, And so I think that when you're at one of the schools that's a top school in your league, you're always going to have a chance to move forward. And that's what I firmly believe Chattanooga is. I think it's one of the better jobs in the Southern Conference. And so all those things wrapped up. And after talking to Lamont, I'm like, man, this guy, Coach Paris, he's got a great vision for what this is going to look like. I'm going to get to be pushed and challenged, and I'm going to get to be a part of this. Like, let's do it. So that's kind of how that happened. There was really no scientific process with it, right? It was just kind of like a lot of things in this business, happened quick, and it felt really right, and I think it has been really right. So it's been a good thing.
Well, you talked about, having to jump at an opportunity when it comes to you, and that's really what you did. And Lamont's a guy, was a killer at Wisconsin. They had so much success, in the Big Ten and the NCAA tournament with recruiting guys that other Big Ten teams thought weren't good enough, and then they turn them into all Big Ten guys. So, him getting his first head coaching job, Division I think everybody, would be inclined to, well, let's give this guy a chance if he, offers us a spot to be on his staff. So that certainly was a great move. And, then, like you said, you want to round yourself towards eventually, as you get older, marketing yourself to be a Division I head coach. I mean, that's the goal of anybody in this, I would think. So to do that now at the SoCon level, you've got an interesting landscape. You got some good basketball programs. You got some not so good basketball programs. You got some really good academic schools in the SoCon. There's some high academic Ohio kids that have gone there. But like you said, at Chattanooga, you're not going to out-recruit the MAC for the top Ohio kids, just like they're not going to out-recruit you for the top Tennessee kids. That's just the way college basketball is at the mid-major level. So, the last thing I kind of want to ask you is you get down to Chattanooga and, you called me and you told me, well, I'm going to start, going south of here in terms of where I want to recruit at. So when you made that determination, you said, well, I need to try and get the best mid-major kids, in these certain southern, cities or states. How did you go about just getting that process started? You reaching out to top high school programs, AAU programs, scouts. I mean, it's just like we talked about earlier, where you get thrown into recruiting at Ohio U. Now you're getting thrown into recruiting states that you're not very familiar with because, at OU, so much, like you said, of the recruiting is in state.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's one of the big reasons why I came down here. Obviously, the biggest was to be a part of what Coach Paris was doing. But, like I said, kind of the side benefit of that for me was to be able to recruit some different guys. And it's hard. It's really it is definitely a different deal because, I'm walking into gyms. It used to be, you walk into Garfield Heights or you walk in wherever you walk into, like I knew those people. And it didn't matter what gym it was. If it was Columbus, whether Cleveland, whatever it was, like you'd have a pretty good feel. If you didn't know them, like they knew, okay, I see that logo. I talked to him on the phone, like boom, he's one of our guys. Like it was just, it was different. And so that's it's been good for me to be able to do, but like you said, I'm just calling people, right? I'm just calling AAU coaches. I'm calling scouting service guys. I'm calling high school coaches and just trying to tell them our story, trying to develop relationships, trying to just be, like I said before, just be normal and get them to be able to see, because it's going to take a little bit of time to break down some walls with trust, right? And guys to think, I'm sure that a lot of these higher end AAU coaches, they get guys calling them all the time. They call them one time, they never hear back from them. Right. And it's a deal. We're trying to be consistent with our communication, as consistent as we can. We're trying to be visible. And then just trying to find ways to be able to help people and to touch people without necessarily needing anything, whether or not it's sending out a note, sending out a newsletter, just showing up in their gym and not asking for anything, not recruiting a kid, but just showing up and introducing ourselves and leaving. It's just ways like that where people realize that, okay, these guys are here. They're trying to do this the right way. We can respect that.
Okay. No, I hear you. And I mean, that's great insight. And then, so anyone listening to this podcast, the way this goes here is, Jason and I, we talk about some guests and some guys we want to have on. And then, I reach out to that person and I kind of think about that person and their career and, kind of craft a theme here. Unless today's theme was kind of Coach Fuss going from, a manager role to an ops role to assistant coach. And you really hit the big time within the last couple weeks. And you texted me and asked, you know where this is going. You asked me if this could be included in the podcast. So, just go ahead and brag on yourself. Tell the world what happened.
Hey, I get the T.O. followed me on Twitter last week, right? Like it was a big deal. I was excited. No, so Terrell Owens played football, obviously, very well documented. He played at Chattanooga, and then NFL just got inducted in the Hall of Fame. He also played basketball here, and so he's been around. He was around last year. Came to a football game and came to a workout, and he's actually been pretty visible on campus whenever he's around. It's been really cool. So he was here he did his Hall of Fame induction here in Chattanooga, which a lot of different drama, debate potentially surrounding that, but it ended up being a great thing. Like, really cool experience for the community. They had probably 3,000 or 4,000 people in the arena. We did it in our arena. It was a great deal. Really cool to see that and be there. And the day before, we're like, we have to play pickup with T.O., right? We have to do it. And so we got word to him that we were playing noon ball in our practice facility. And what do you know? He shows up, and we played for about 45 minutes to an hour. Just played pickup basketball. He was just another guy. It was a really cool experience. So we got a nice little picture afterwards, and I tweeted that out, and he followed me. So I was giving everybody on the staff a hard time, like, "Oh, fellas, sorry, man. T.O., he's following me. My fault, man." So
did he hear about how you used to be a high flyer?
You know what? I mean, he's 44 years old, and like it was ridiculous. Like, that's the difference between a Hall of Fame athlete who obviously still keeps himself right, and he played basketball here. He was started a couple games here, but was for the most part a role guy with the team. But I mean, like, my man's measurables are ridiculous, as you would assume from a Hall of Fame player. But I mean, like, arms, length, and just, he came down the paint. I think he probably traveled, but I'm like, you know what? Forget this. I'm jumping, even if this means he sprains his ankle and he comes across the tomorrow with crutches. Like, I'm going, and I jumped, and he laid it in. So that's but you know,
that's an anticlimactic ending.
Like, he was lightly. Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, no, like,
we all thought you were gonna say, like, I blocked it off the backboard.
Yeah, no. I mean, I can't jump. I was trying, actually, as hard as I could, but it's a different deal, man. Hall of Fame athleticism is a different deal. But I did make a shot with him lightly contesting me, like, on the side, so I'm counting that as me getting a bucket on him.
Count it. Wow, well, that was it. That's the way we want to always end on some good stories, and that's the way to end. Fuss gets a bucket on T.O. is the headline. So, well, that's the time we have, guys. Again, well, now that if he's followed by Terrell Owens, that means you, the listener, can sure as hell follow him. So follow Coach Aaron Fuss, and that was I mean, he got to. So as we said, that was Coach Aaron Fuss from Tennessee Chattanooga, Division I program out of the SoCon. My name is Corey Albertson for Jason Morrow. That was the Triple Double Podcast. Fuss, you're one of my good friends in coaching. Thank you for coming on, brother.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Best of luck with this. This is it's something I look forward to listening to. You guys do a great job with this, so I appreciate it. And hopefully we picked up some new Mocs fans tonight.